There's the Candlelight label. That was my label. Well, one of my labels. That was certainly my first label. And there's Times Square Records. Times Square Records, was a record label and a store. And that's where the story of ACAPELLA started. That's where it was truly created. I was one of the people who had arranged a record deal for Slim. Slim was the owner and the founder of Times Square Records. The deal included an entire batch of masters that I was going to buy but could not afford, and Slim bought them through something that I set up along with my friend Don. And in this batch of masters, unknown to anyone, were a cappella recordings. Now, they were not recorded to be a cappella. These were recordings from the 50s that had been done without music for one reason. The record company could get to listen to the group, and if they were going to record the group, they could have the arranger or the band or some member of the band listen to the recording, figure out what key it was in, and come up with an arrangement so they could make a record. And that is the basis of all a cappella recordings in the 50s and very early 60s. They were practice tapes, and that was it. Well, Slim decided to put out some of these recordings, even some of the bad ones, because he found there was some interest in them by his playing them in the store for customers. However, he felt, and I didn't agree with this, he felt that he had to give them some kind of a name or he'd have a problem. In other words, you might buy the record, then bring it back and say there's no band on it. So he wanted to identify the fact that there was no music in the background. I didn't see the necessity of it because Times Square Records sold only group records, vocal group records, rock and roll and rhythm and blues vocal group records anyway. But he wanted to identify it. We had a long discussion, argument, back and forth for weeks. I wanted to call the music subway sounds, street corner sounds, a whole bunch of names like that that I thought described that kind of singing accurately. And it did, in fact, describe those groups that were singing on the corners. Well, he agreed and he didn't agree. So one day, out of frustration, because we had come up with so many names and couldn't agree on anything, he opened the dictionary and, of course, found a cappella. That's a space apostrophe capella. A cappella. It's almost two words. And though it means singing without music, it really means the highbrow stuff. It's the opera, classical type singing that really applies to a cappella. And then in a move that would live forever, he changed the word and made it one word, a cappella. And that word, from almost that day on, meant a vocal group singing rock and roll or rhythm and blues without music. And so the first records were released, and it said right on the label, a cappella. The response was very strong, and many vocal groups were very surprised by this and jumped in to record that way because they didn't think they had any other chance of recording. Now suddenly they did, because after all, there was now a style called a cappella. And it was basically that simple. And that is how it started. But without that little twist, that little happening with Slim, well, who knows? Who knows? I will tell you one thing that was kind of odd. Some of the records, when first made available in other stores in New York, ended up in the Italian language section because no one really knew what it was. So there were stores that had a cappella records that could have sold them, but put them in the wrong place and didn't sell them. So think about a group singing, let's say, whatever, Gloria, 1,000 Miles Away, Sunday Kind of Love, and they're in the Italian language section. So it was a rough thing starting it in one way, and it was easy in another way. But it has endured since the very early 60s, and in one form or another, of course, it will never die. And the word a cappella, in the sense that I'm using it, has, of course, spread all over the planet and is part of the pop culture and part of the language.